Hello viewers, and welcome to my blimp. Just a moment. When it comes to the history of British flying women, you may know a handful of famous names, but there's countless others whose achievements have been largely forgotten. Today we start our epic 4-part journey through 200 years of British women in the air. Those fantastic women and their flying machines. We start our journey with the very earliest days of flight, the age of balloons and gliders. This part of aviation history is often overlooked, but it was crucial in developing the fundamentals of flight.
Captain Ridgeable to Cathay, come in. Captain Ridgeable. Over.
Captain Ridgeable, is that you? I'm receiving a transmission from Captain D. Ridgeable. Captain Ridgeable, come in.
I'm afraid I'm not entirely convinced that women should be flying. You see, when they get to a sufficiently high altitude, the humours start floating around in the body and it creates a sort of female derangement.
Yes, thank you, Captain Ridgeable, for representing the barriers and challenges which women have faced in their journey to conquer the skies. Anyway, in November 1783, the French Montgolfier balloon flew over Paris, becoming the first piloted flight in history. In June 1784, Elizabeth Teeble became the first woman to fly when she flew in a balloon over Lyon.
What? A French woman? Outrageous! Pull your socks up, British girls!
Oh, so you're all in favour now, aren't you? Yes, the French were at the cutting edge of aviation. Britain needed to catch up. Enter stage left, Leticia Sage. Leticia was a struggling actress in London, receiving largely negative reviews in the press. But one thing that dramatic people know is how to get attention. And Leticia Sage had the cunning plan to win lasting fame and fortune by becoming the first British woman to fly. She teamed up with Italian Vincenzo Lunardi, who, in September 1784, made the first manned balloon flight in England. It would have been the first in Britain, but his rival, the Scottish James Tytler, had beaten him to it just a month before in Edinburgh. Leticia and Vincenzo's first attempt in May 1785 failed because the basket was too heavy. The crowd, who had paid good money to see the flight, became angry and demanded a refund.
Just not happy? Wanted to see summat fly?
In their next attempt, a month later, the basket was still too heavy. Did Leticia nobly sacrifice her place so that the flight could succeed? Of course not. She was determined to get in the air no matter what. Vincenzo and another passenger stepped out of the basket. Finally, the balloon began to lift. Leticia Sage was now officially the first British woman to fly. Eventually, what goes up must come down again. The balloon descended rapidly and hit the ground with a crash, bouncing along the fields. Men rushed to hold it down, and it finally came to a rest. The local farmer was not impressed with the destruction of his crops. Leticia emerged, slightly injured but alive. There was a celebration afterwards, and she enjoyed her newfound fame, later publishing an account of the trip. Sadly, this did not revive her acting career, and it was to be her only flight. But she will always be the first British woman to fly. Just a few months later, a Mrs. Hines, of whom little is known, became the first British woman to fly at night and land on water when her balloon flew unexpectedly over the Suffolk coast and landed in the English Channel. You would think that that would be an obvious hazard, launching a balloon near the coast on an evening when the winds are blowing offshore. Anyway, She survived and was picked up by a fishing boat, thus avoiding becoming the first female flying fatality. That sombre record was claimed by Frenchwoman Sophie Blanchard, who died in a balloon accident in Paris in 1819. Ballooning, like most of early flight, was incredibly dangerous. Pilatre de Rosier, who piloted the very first Montgolfier balloon flight in 1783, died trying to fly across the English Channel 2 years later. British women managed to avoid serious flying accidents until 1824, when Jane Stocks, an 18-year-old servant, volunteered to help Thomas Harris with his latest invention. Thomas was working on a special release valve which would quickly deflate the balloon when landing. The idea was to prevent the balloon being dragged along by the wind, which was very dangerous. Thomas and Jane set off and flew across London, but when Thomas tried to adjust their height, he accidentally pulled the quick release valve, which completely deflated the balloon hundreds of feet in the air. The tragic irony is that the safety invention had worked perfectly, just at the wrong time. The balloon hurtled to the ground. Thomas was killed instantly. The balloon was called Royal George, which could actually be a very unlucky name for a craft, as we've covered another disaster which happened on a different Royal George. Jane was seriously injured and unconscious, but recovered. She found herself famous as the girl who cheated death. Despite this traumatic experience, Jane was still up for more flying, and offers poured in from gentlemen balloonists who wanted to take her up for a ride. One of them, George Graham, had the brilliant idea that one woman in a balloon was quite an attraction, but two would be even better.
2 women in the air? Preposterous!
George's wife Margaret had actually learned how to fly a balloon. It was planned for her to fly with Jane over London in 1826. However, before they could set off, once again the basket was too heavy. Jane Stocks could have made history as part of this female flying duo, but unfortunately she was ordered out of the basket. Margaret Graham, by herself, became the first British female pilot. There was no fanfare about this great achievement. A furious pub landlord demanded compensation as she had landed in his vegetable patch.
Bad parking. Typical woman's attempt.
All right, Captain. Margaret and George became a flying power couple, running a ballooning business, with Margaret taking equal share of the flying work. This was quite impressive considering that she was only in her early 20s and raising a number of young children. However, accidents were always around the corner. In 1836, Margaret was seriously injured when she fell 30 feet from the air. This did not deter her, and by 1850, aged 45, she had made over 50 balloon flights. They narrowly avoided a collision with the Crystal Palace during the Great Exhibition in 1851, instead crashing into the roof of a house. They were injured and rescued, but sued for damages. Unfortunately, the media had a field day, and this latest accident was enough to convince George, who was 66, that his ballooning days were over. Margaret, however, continued flying, making her 70th flight later that year. When she died naturally in 1864, aged 60, she had made around 80 balloon flights. She was not just the first British female pilot, but also a successful flying entrepreneur.
Well, all right. Balloons are one thing, but surely women couldn't handle anything more advanced.
Oh, just you wait. It's time for the glider age. By the late 19th century, the heyday of the balloon was waning as attention turned to fixed-wing gliders. Inventors hoped to soar through the air like birds, and Percy Pilcher was fascinated. When he moved to Glasgow to study engineering, his sister Ella moved in with him. But she wasn't there just to cook and clean. She would also help him with his experiments. Together they built and tested various prototypes. In 1895, Percy met Otto Lilienthal, who was at the cutting edge of glider technology. In 1896, Percy and Ella built a prototype called the Hawk. Ella may have flown in it as she was heavily involved in its construction. But she shares the credit for the first British female glider flight with her cousin Dorothy. In June 1897, Percy planned a test flight for the Hawk. Dorothy was allowed to have a go. She was strapped in and Percy ran the glider downhill. Before long, Dorothy was soaring 30 feet above the ground, proof that Percy and Ella's prototype was successful. Both glider and pilot landed safely, and the Hawk continued its test flights. Percy went on to break numerous world distance gliding records. Sadly, he died just 2 years later when he crashed during another experimental flight. This was a dangerous time for flying. Otto Lilienthal died in a similar accident just a year before. Pilcher and Lilienthal were way more advanced than they're usually given credit for. Had they not died so tragically early, they could have gone on to beat the Wright brothers to the development of powered flight. Ella was voted in as honorary member of the Aeronautical Society of Great Britain, so that her brother's legacy would not be forgotten. The Pilcher story is a great reminder that the history of science is not of lone geniuses, but of cooperation and shared knowledge. Ella and Percy had to work together to bring their vision to life, just as Percy cooperated with Otto Lilienthal.
All things considered, I think we work quite well together, don't we?
I think so too. But this is only the first part of our journey. Next time, we venture into the aeroplane age.
And the airship, don't forget!
Of course. This video is based on the book Magnificent Women and Flying Machines by Sally Smith, which explore these stories in much more detail. I'll see you next time.
Leticia Sage goes in a balloon. Helen Sherman gets close to the moon.